Because even though it says, will I be ready here? I believe you will. So let me just start by kind of telling you guys my first trade show experience and why yours is not going to be like that, right? So my first trade show was the New York International Gift Fair. Now, if you don't know anything about trade shows, it's a biggie. 2,000 to 3,000 booths, 5 days, lots of sections, major companies, along with individual makers. And I found out about this trade show. Everything I read online said, apply now. It's going to take you 2 or 3 shows to get in. I applied in, I believe it was October. I got a phone call in November. We have a corner booth in our January show. We want to use it to highlight a new jeweler. Do you want to do it? I said yes without even thinking, hung up the phone. I was like, what just happened? Like, I just said I was going to do a trade show in 2 months. And I've never even been to this show, right? Like, I don't even know. I never walked it, nothing. Needless to say, a few fights with my husband, some sleepless nights, a lot of tears. I got there. And I made a lot of stuff up as I went along. I was taking orders by listening to how my neighbor took orders and then asking the same questions, right? I showed you guys, I didn't even have a line sheet. I had this useless price list. We've already seen, and we'll see it again, that really ugly booth. It was terrible. But at the end of the day, it actually ended up being an okay show. I picked up some really fantastic accounts. I met some great people. So despite my not knowing anything, it still worked out. So what we're going to do with you guys is you're going to learn from all the mistakes I made. We're going to get you ready. And then your first show, you're going to knock it out of the park, right? So let's talk about some of the benefits of exhibiting at trade shows. And I know that you guys, some of you are panicking, especially online. I can't afford it, right? I can't afford it. They're super expensive. They're really crazy. Sit tight with me on this one because we're going to talk about A, they're not all as expensive as you might think. And B, there are ways to fund a trade show. So sit tight with me while we talk about these benefits, where to find shows, and then I promise you we will tackle the money piece. And just like we did with pricing, we're going to make it so much less scary. That's my thing. I'm going to make it less scary for you, right? So let's talk about some of the benefits of exhibiting at a trade show. One of the big things that I see is that it establishes commitment. So buyers see you at a trade show. There is cost involved with doing a show. Buyers know that you're in it to win it, right? You are in to play. It also helps you develop personal relationships with buyers. So I know my buyers face to face. I've met them, we've interacted, we talk about what's going on. You get to do that friendly chit chat that you're not doing over email. You're not calling them and doing it in the store, right? Because they're talking to customers all day. So you're building that personal relationship with buyers. You're getting to know them. Buyers get to touch and interact with product before they buy. With the exception of that online, those kind of like still very small but growing online market. We're talking about physical products in a physical store. I can send a buyer this postcard, and they're going to think, this is kind of a nice necklace. They're going to see it in the store, or in the trade show. They're going to think about how it looks in their store. We'll get to that. They're going to see it at the trade show. They might even see it on me at the trade show, and they're going to think, that is an amazing necklace. Why would I not want that in my store, right? They're going to see how heavy it is. They're going to see how, what it weighs, all of that stuff that we kind of talked about when we were doing sales. Physical products, physical store, and being at a trade show lets you see that. So then also, there are no surprises for the buyer. Because when you're asking a buyer to place an order of products they've never seen in person, there is an element of risk there, right? They're going to make assumptions. I think it's this big. I think it looks like that. I think it's going to be like that. Here, there's no risk. I see it. I liked it. We wrote the order. I know I'm going to get one like this. Or in the case of those of you who may make one-of-a-kind products, I know I'm going to get something similar, right? But they know what they're going to get. You're also going to find stores that you wouldn't find through research. So we're doing the research. Research works. It's important. You always want to be building that list, even if you're doing trade shows. But every time I do a trade show, I pick up new stores in cities that I've never heard of. I think every show I find a new city in Massachusetts. I can't believe there are still cities in Massachusetts that aren't carrying my work, but I meet them every show. You might find cities, you might find things that surprise you. I know that there are a few stores that I have that if I had been doing research and I came across their name or their website, I'm not sure that I would have put them on my list, right? But they're actually great stores and great people, and they sell the product well. The other thing, and we don't have a ton of time to dive into this, but trade shows also help you meet press and other industry contacts. So I actually got a question on my website yesterday where someone said, I see that you have a lot of press. Halili, when she introduced me, was nice enough to name a few of those media outlets for me. Design Sponge, Cooking Light, I was just in Elle Decor. All of that press that I've gotten came from trade shows. And it was super easy because they are there walking around looking for new, great product. Now, there are things that you can do to help kind of really accelerate that press piece at a trade show. It's not something we can get into here, but my friend Bridget Lyons has a great product for those of you who are interested in that press piece. She actually does all kinds of press education. You can go to the letter B, so bethinkforward.com. That's Bridget's website. She's got a great resource on actually how to reach out to press at trade shows. So if that's a piece, you can talk to Bridget and she's going to help you out there. But it is a huge benefit. And some of the press that I've gotten was simply by me being there and the press being there. Now I'm a little more strategic, but in the beginning, some of those, the Cooking Light piece, Better Homes and Gardens, those just happened because I was there. The other benefit of doing a trade show is that it forces a deadline, right? So part of the problem, I gave you guys that marketing calendar, we're filling it out, but we all know that sometimes accountability can be really hard, right? We were talking about that with the front row group. It's hard to keep yourselves accountable. You invest a couple grand in a trade show, you're going to do everything in your power, right, to be ready. You're going to get that line sheet done. You're going to get those postcards mailed out so that stores know to find you. You're going to get stuff done. You might not sleep for a few weeks, but you're going to get stuff done. And that really helps grow your business, giving you those deadlines. So let's talk about where to find trade shows. This is a case where you can go to other designers' websites. Now, we talked about when you're researching your stores, I tend to stay away from that. In trade shows, it's one of the first places I go. And so you can see, you find brands that are similar. This is my friend Espacio. We looked at her catalog before. I wouldn't be going to her website because we have different price points and different customers. The Austin hipster crowd is not my crowd. But if you had a price point and a customer similar to Espacio, you might go to her website. And truthfully, this is actually how I got started in trade shows in the first place. When I started my business, I was doing a lot of retail craft shows. And my entire research strategy was go to the websites of other jewelers who I thought had, work that would hit the same market as mine. I would say, what shows are they doing? And I would write this down. And I would just write them down. And somewhere in all that research is where I came across this little thing called the New York International Gift Fair. And I thought, well, everyone else is doing it, so I'm going to do it too. The rest is history. So that is a perfectly fantastic strategy for finding trade shows. Instagram has become a really great trade show research strategy. So first off, we want to follow potential stores on Instagram, right? We want to find stores we want to carry, and we're going to follow them. And then you can check out their Instagram feed, because a lot of the time, if they're shopping a show, they've probably Instagrammed it while they were there. And I wouldn't even wait to have it come up through the next time. Go back through their feed. So this is a shop, Tildy, that carries me in Portland. And we were kind of online friends before she ordered. So I actually knew, before she placed her last order, I knew that she was at the show. I was following her on Instagram. I was like, oh, Debbie's here. But so you can find these stores, head to their Instagram, and see where they're going. Most of the time, they're also using the show hashtags, right? Because now every show has a hashtag. Everybody has a hashtag for everything. We have a hashtag. It's Almond Live if you guys want to use it. But every show is going to have a hashtag. So in this case, Debbie's shopping at New York Now. New York International Gift Fair changed their name to New York Now. People are going to call it New York Gift until they die. Till they die. It's going to be New York Gift. But it's officially called New York Now. So she's going to use this hashtag New York Now. So if you have, so this is going to help us on two fronts. It's going to help us on show research and store research. Because if I know that Debbie's at New York Now and I hit that hashtag, I can see who else is there too, right? Or who else was there. So this is how that whole, and Giselle and Kelly talked about how much they're on Instagram following those chains of links. You guys can do that too. But so if you know that you want to be in the store and you see that she always shops New York Now, it's going to go on your list, right? The other great thing that you can do with Instagram is you start to get a sense of what happens at a show. So a lot of times the shows are going to have an Instagram feed too. So you can look at the hashtag, but it's a great way to research shows and know if they're a good fit. So Life and Style is actually a show in Australia. It happens twice a year, once in Melbourne, once in Sydney. This is like my aesthetic all over it, man. Like I want to be here. And the only reason I know about this show is because of Instagram. But it's certainly on my list. Someday, hopefully, I'm rolling down to Australia and doing that show. So see, beauty of trade shows doesn't have to be your country, anywhere in the world. So Instagram can help us see that. All right, so we're following stores and designers. Now, I've also put together a little resource list for you guys. So yeah, because there are standard shows. Now, I'm not going to make any recommendations to anyone about any show because what we want to do is kind of go back to that, where are our buyers, where are our stores, where is that? But there are definitely standout shows that you hear people talking about, and that resource list puts those together by month. And then you're going to ask your peers. So we can ask people, what shows have you done or what shows have you heard of? So you can start digging that way. And I would love to maybe just hear from people online, are there shows you're thinking about? And we can kind of turn to here. Have you guys heard of any shows that maybe you're thinking about? What have you heard?
I walked San Francisco International Gift Fair just because I'm here.
Because you're here, right? Absolutely.
I'm not necessarily sure that was the right fit for me, but it was interesting.
Right, and it can be definitely helpful to kind of look at those shows. And I know that show has kind of had kind of some ups and downs. It was purchased by another company.
Yeah.
So I think it's a little bit of a transition. So this is also a case where local isn't necessarily better, right? Just because it's your local show doesn't mean it's better. And most shows are going to tend to draw a fairly local buyer. Some branch out to a little more international. New York Now, it's a pretty international mix of stores. I get stores from California, I get stores from Canada, lots of places. But I mentioned every little town in Massachusetts buys my work. That's because every store in Massachusetts shops New York Now. It's a quick train ride down, right?
Is Buyer's Market of American Craft, is that a trade show or American Craft Council?
So yeah, that's a great question.
Okay.
So there are a few specific shows that are handmade in the U.S. shows.
Okay.
And both of those that you named are. So the Buyer's Market of American Craft, they're actually going through a rebrand as well. And they're getting changed to the American Made Show. Actually, they did change the American Made Show.
Okay.
It's another one of those where it's going to get called 20 different things for a while. That's what's going to happen. So that's the American Made Show. That is a wholesale show. That's a trade show. Mm-hmm. So let's back up for a second here, because I know we're tossing around this wholesale trade show, all that stuff. Back it up. So these shows are shows that are only open to the trade, hence trade show. So your regular retail customer, not going to be able to come in and shop at those. Just buyers, and then press and industry. And then, of course, exhibitors. So you might have heard of, if you're thinking of things like Renegade and Art Star and Crafty Bastards, those are all retail shows. That's not what we're talking about here. We are talking about those specific to the trade. Now that said, there are a few trade shows that do cater just to handmade products. And these in particular cater to handmade in the US and Canada. So American Made Show, that takes place, it used to be in Philly, they just moved to DC. January in DC. And then the American Craft Council show is actually an interesting show in that they have a few days that are wholesale only, and then a few days that are retail. And you can choose to do one or the other. So that's where you might have kind of gotten some confusion. Is it wholesale? Is it retail? with the American Craft Council show, they did a huge push. They expanded their wholesale section, but that is a show that you have to apply for pretty far in advance. So like for the 2015 show, I believe applications are due sometime in the beginning of August of the previous year. So that one's up pretty far in advance.
I'm sorry, because this is so foreign to me.
Yeah.
I don't understand the difference between the trade show and the retail show.
All right, I'm so glad you asked. We'll back it up a minute. All right, so at a retail show, you bring your product. You bring lots of product, right? And that could be a retail show, that could be a farmer's market, wherever it is. You're selling at your retail price point
Got it.
to the end customer.
Got it.
At a wholesale show or a trade show, names are interchangeable. I'm bringing one of everything.
Got it.
Buyers are writing orders. So you might also hear them referred to as an order writing store or order writing show. Every so often you hear of a trade show that's called cash and carry. So there's a show in Vegas, Pool. It's part of the bigger fashion trade shows. Pool has a cash and carry section. There you bring a bunch of product, you sell it at wholesale prices, but buyers actually take it away with them. Most shows actually don't allow this. They are order writing only.
Those usually manufactured product too.
Typically, yes. Cash and carry tends to be low price point manufactured.
Okay. What about the magic show?
So actually, Pool is part of Magic.
Okay.
So those are big fashion trade shows. So Vegas was one of those hubs for the fashion shows. And what you start to see is that certain cities become known for their trade shows. So obviously New York, you have New York now, but then you also get the National Stationery Show and the International Contemporary Furniture Fair. Those are major New York shows. Then you get Atlanta. And so what you have in a place like Atlanta is you have showrooms. We're going to skip those. It's not important to us. But basically, showrooms are where sales reps present all their product. And those are open all year round. But in Atlanta, you have a trade show that then takes place where people come, set up their booth. Smaller companies can do this. And you sell just for a few days. I'm sure we're getting some online questions.
Well, some people are offering what trade shows they're considering. Time Capsule says ASD or America's Mart. Our Secret Treehouse Museum Store Association Expo. Let's see.
Other people are asking is the difference between craft shows. Do you think those are valuable for this?
Yeah,
topic?
so typically if it's a craft show, that usually also refers to a retail show, not a trade show. The only show I know that uses craft in its name that is a wholesale show is the American Craft Council's Baltimore Wholesale Show.
Now,
Good
Ashley
question.
in Nashville wants to know how you get in to just walk a show.
Ashley in Nashville, I'm so glad you asked.
You're such a mind
We're going to talk about that right now. Yeah, so this is a big question, is do I need to visit a trade show before I exhibit at it? Clearly I did not. I just went to New York and did it. And in some ways, I actually think that helped me. Because, like I said, dive into the deep end. And what I've actually seen is I know a lot of people who come and walk a show like New York Gift, and they're like, I can't do it. It's too big. It's too much. It's definitely not my first show. I'm not ready. I can tell you, it's not too big. It's not too much. You can totally do a show like that. So, that said, I think it's important to at least go to a trade show before you do a trade show. So this is a case where maybe what you're thinking is, I want to do New York now, but I live in San Francisco. So I'm going to go, like you did, walk the San Francisco International Gift Fair, right? So that at least you get a sense of what a trade show looks like. You get a sense of what those booths look like. You see what's happening on the show floor. So, maybe you live in Dallas, and Dallas isn't your market. You're not going to sell there. Maybe you're actually going to go to the Atlanta show. Maybe that's better for you. But you're near Dallas. Go walk the Dallas show just to get a sense of what's going on. Now, how do you do that, right? So these shows are trade only, right? They're not open to the public. They're open to the trade. First of all, you guys are the trade, right? You're part of the trade. That's what we're doing here. But what you never want to do with a trade show is reach out through registration. So when you go to a show's website, it's going to say, exhibit, register. And you're thinking, I'm not exhibiting yet. I want to register. That's for buyers. If you contact the registration staff, their job is to sell registration. So what they're going to tell you is you need to buy a badge as a non-exhibiting manufacturer. New York Now, that badge is $150. But here's what you do. We don't go through registration. We go through sales. So you click that exhibit button and you figure out who the sales reps are for the show. Because the job of sales is to sell booths to exhibitors. You email sales and you say, I'm thinking about doing your show. Can I come as a guest of sales? They're going to say yes every time, and you're going to get that free badge. Because that's what they want to do. They want you to come do their show. It's their job to sell booths, so they're going to make it super easy for you to scope it out. Now, I will say that there are a few shows that limit how much time you can spend on the show floor doing this. So I know I went and walked ENK Accessory Circuit. It's a high-end accessory show. They do not give you like free reign of the show floor. They come in, they talk to you, and then the sales rep gives you a tour. It's not ideal. It's a little bit better to walk around on your own. You get to see a little more, but it still gets you on the show floor. You still see what's going on. Now, if you're walking those shows, we're going to talk about evaluating the trade show in a minute, but if you're walking those shows, it's important that you have good etiquette. So remember that the other exhibitors are there to sell to buyers. They're not there to answer your questions. I'll be perfectly upfront and tell you that if you walk by me at a trade show and I'm not talking to a buyer, I'll answer your questions. But that's me. And you guys all know me now, right? That said, if I'm talking to a buyer, please do not. Please don't stop and talk to me. And if I blow you off to start talking to a buyer, you know why. But for the most part, it's kind of observe at a distance. We get any other questions from the online audience?
Well, Jay Richards has one. He says, I did 3 trade shows last year and got great feedback from fellow exhibitors, product display energy, yet didn't get any orders at the trade show.
Okay.
Is this normal?
It's hard to answer that question without knowing the bigger picture of his business, but what I would say is it depends on the show. There are certain types of shows where order writing is common. There are certain types of shows where it isn't. So like the International Contemporary Furniture Fair, nobody writes orders. It's like networking, it's contacts, and then you come home later and then you get the orders. So without knowing the shows, I don't really know. My guess would be that it might have been not the right fit buyer and not the right fit show. That's probably what's happening. So if you're out there, your work is great, the other exhibitors are telling you it's great, something is not the right fit with you in the show, and I would look for some other shows.
So one more. LP is asking, when you walk a show, can you just step us through what exactly you do at the show?
Yes, I can.
You have a slide for that?
We're talking about evaluating those shows,
Okay.
right? So one of the first things that you're going to want to do when you're walking that trade show is don't try to cover the whole thing, especially if it's a big show. If it's a small show, you might be able to do it. If it's a big show, you are going to be exhausted. So do your research and figure out which sections of the show, if there are sections, are right for you. So at a show like New York Gift, at a show like Atlanta, there are sections. New York Gift has handmade. They have a section called Accent on Design, which is where I exhibit. They have a section for stationery and paper goods. They have an accessories section. So there's a whole lot. In Atlanta, there's a handmade section. There's a section called Boutique. So do your research first and figure out which sections of the show, and there's probably going to be a couple, are most likely right for your product. Ignore the other sections. Just walk those. So that's the first thing. Then when we're walking that show, you want to be on the lookout for certain things to help you know if it's the right show for you. So first off, I'll say off the bat, just always look at booth design. You're going to get so many ideas for booth design as you're walking around. But if we're evaluating the show, what types of products are sold there? And some of this you can do through the show's website too, but sometimes it's hard. It's just easier, faster, more visceral just to see it in person, right? So what types of products are there? What's the typical price range? Again, we're not going to walk into people's booths. We're not going to like barrel through everybody, but you start to get a sense of where the prices are. You glance here and there. You start to see what's the price range. Is it a lot lower than me? Is it a lot higher than me? Am I kind of right in there? You certainly never want to be the most expensive person at a show.
It took me a long time to realize that those prices were wholesale.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
Because you get kind of caught up and everything looks like a retail environment. You're looking at a price tag on a piece of jewelry, and I'm like, like, oh, that's good. And then, but it was like actually like my regular prices, but yeah.
Right. So all the prices that you're seeing, thank you for pointing that out, are wholesale. So they're wholesale, they're getting marked up to retail. So what's the price range? What are the types of companies that exhibit at the show? Is it like all giant companies, or are there smaller independent makers or designers too? Because if it's a lot of big companies, you're going to feel challenged to stand out. I did one show once at New York Gift, and things shuffle around, and generally that's a good show for me. But once the people across from me were this company that manufactured like modern ceramic fireplace pits. Tiffany's laughing because she's heard this story. And so it's this big company. So first of all, if you're going to have an open flame in the Javits Center, which is where New York Gift is, you have to have both a pyrotechnic and a fire marshal on staff at all times. Plus the owner of the company, plus like 10 sales staff. So in this booth across from me are like 12 people just working the booth. It's a huge booth. They've got flickering fire and a giant LCD TV. It's like being across from Disney World. I thought I had my invisibility cloak on. I was like, I'm over here. Come find me. So if you're like tiny booth and a lot of big exhibitors, it's not the right fit. Fortunately, they didn't stay. We went back to lots of nice, small, independent makers in my section, and all was good. But you want to be aware of that because that's not so good. And you want to know, is your brand a good fit with the other brands? So at a show like places like Magic and Pool, it's going to have this like young, hip, urban vibe. If that's not your brand, I don't care if you want it to be your brand. If it's not your brand, don't do it. You also want to take a look at what geographic areas do the majority of buyers come from. So when you're walking around that show, pay attention to badges. Everybody at trade show is wearing a badge. Most shows color code them. Who's a buyer, who's an exhibitor, who's press. Look at those badges while you're walking around. Where are the buyers from? And what types of stores are you seeing? You can usually tell if you're seeing big stores or solo stores because big stores buy in groups. You've got like the Anthropologie entourage walking by, and they also have all their badges flipped so you don't know their Anthropologie, right? Small stores, it's one person, maybe two. It's like the couple or the mother and daughter. So you'll start to see are like big buyer masses moving around or little buyers. And then do these places match where your ideal customers are shopping? Now, some shows you're going to see both. New York Gift, you get the buyer mass, and you get those mom and pop shops too. And you also just want to pay attention to how many exhibitors and booths are at the show. Is it huge? Is it small? You're going to be, big fish, small pond, small fish, giant pond. And just because a show is big doesn't mean that you still can't have that like big fish, small pond feel if you're in a section that feels small. So even though New York is huge, other than that one time I was across from the fireplace people, I have never felt like a tiny fish in a giant pond. I feel like a small fish in a medium-sized pond maybe, but I don't feel like I can't hack it, right? So if they've got the show divided well, being big isn't a huge deal. And then, do you feel like you belong? Like, is the vibe right for you? At the end of the day, sometimes that's how you're going to make your decision. So when I started in New York Gift, I started in the handmade section. I didn't know anything about the show. Clearly, I mixed stuff by hand. That's where I applied. The first time I was there, I walked the show, and I walked this other section called Accent on Design. A broader product range, bigger mix, not a lot of jewelry. But I walked that section, and I was like, I know that I belong here. And that was all I needed. And then people asked me, like, why'd you move to Accent? Because I just knew it was right for me. Like, I knew it was my people. I knew it was my buyer. I knew it was the brands I wanted to surround myself with. And so that's really the thing. If you're at a show and it feels off, it's not a good show. Anytime I've done a show where I thought, well, it's not quite right, but maybe I'll find some buyers, miserable. So don't force it. You want that vibe to be right. And then, of course, we've got that consideration of booth fee. So when we reach out to sales staff to walk a show, as opposed to just, going through sales, they're going to give us all this information. We're going to get all the details about the show. So if you're thinking about doing a show, even if it's just a little inkling, and even if you're not going to walk it, reach out to the sales staff and get the information. because you want to know what you're heading into. So I want to give you guys some examples of booth fees because I want you to see that there's a pretty big range out there, right? So the American Made Show, which we talked about. So most of these on here, just to make it easy for you guys, I did them at a 10 by 10 or maybe somewhere around like 3 meter by 3 meter because that's a pretty standard size. Not every booth is going to be that size. My booth in New York Gift is 8 deep, 15 wide. So most shows actually don't charge as, say, a 10 by 10 booth like you might get at a retail craft show. They charge by square footage. But just to give us some logical comparisons, I pulled almost everything as a 10 by 10. So at the American Made Show, a 10 by 10 booth is going to cost you around $2,100. Now, that's a show where they want to help first-time exhibitors get in. So they actually have a section that's 6 by 10 booths, only for first-time exhibitors, for $1,000. $1,000, it's not so scary. We could get there, right? In New York now, handmade, I believe it's somewhere around $3,800 for a 10 by 10. I'm not in that section. Accent on Design is a little higher price per square foot. So that's a ballpark number. Don't quote me on that one. The National Stationery Show, their standard 10 by 10 booth is going to be just under $3,000. Designers and Agents, that is a high-end kind of fashion and accessories show, $5,800. When you start to get into some of those fashion high-end accessory shows, they charge you a lot more. I think because they can. And then Maison Objet, this is a show in Paris. It's kind of a home design, but also got some lifestyle stuff. Obviously, they're measured in meters, but a 3 meter by 3 meter booth is just, again, a little under $3,000. So in some of these shows, you can also share a booth. So that's one option right there. You can cut your costs down. Now, in the American Made Show, they won't let you split that 6 by 10. That's it. If you're committed to that, you're committed to that. But I know at that show, I believe 2 people can split a 10 by 15. So then you're not paying for a full 10 by 10. You're taking a little less space. At a show like New York Now, they don't technically allow booth sharing, but I know people who will form like a collective and apply as that. So that's a way that you can cut costs as well. So that gives us an idea of kind of price range. You guys have any questions about that? Okay, awesome. So one last thing when we're evaluating, and then we'll start to kind of dive into that budget, money, how to fund stuff, is then you also want to just look at like how are applications reviewed and when are they due. Some shows are going to be actually juried. So some shows, let's do the opposite. Some shows are not juried, which means you send them your application, you send them the money, your check clears, you're in, right? For most of us, we probably don't want those kinds of shows. We want to put ourselves with better quality brands, where they're at least, if they're not jurying, they're at least really reviewing and carefully scrutinizing. Some shows have juried sections and other sections that are open. So this is what a show like New York Now does. My section, Accent on Design, is juried. Handmade is juried. Parts of accessories are juried. So those are good because you know that you're going to be among higher quality. The American Made Show, that they're jurying, they're reviewing. The American Craft Council Show, they're jurying as well. So you want to see, is it rolling or are applications due at a certain time? The American Made Show, they're rolling. As long as there's space, they're looking at people. The American Craft Council's wholesale show, that's that deadline I talked about, sometime early August. So you want to be aware of those. And look at them far in advance. Even if it's a rolling deadline, it helps to apply early because it can help you slide into a better booth, right? By then, like a couple weeks before, they might still have a few booths left, but they might not be the one that you want, right? They're like the back corner that they're trying really hard to fill. So pay attention to those deadlines. So if you're marking those trade shows on your calendar, make sure you go in, look at what those deadlines are, back up on your marketing calendar so you can know that you have to have those ready. Because when you're applying to these shows, they're going to want to see a line sheet. They might ask for a list of stores. If you don't have any, don't sweat it. Hopefully, though, you all are going to go out and use those marketing strategies so that when you apply to your show, you've got at least a couple of stores to put on that list, right? We can all do that. It's totally doable. You're all going to have like 5 stores by next week. I know it. You can do it. So make note of that on your calendar. And you also want to just make sure, do you have to continue to do the same show, or must you reapply? Most shows you're in, but a few, they make you reapply, or at least they review what's going on. And do you have to commit to multiple shows? So some shows, it's not we make you commit, but if you don't keep coming, you don't get your same booth. So New York Gift is like that. My booth is my booth as long as I do every show, and that's a twice-a-year show. I do every show, and I don't do something that's so aesthetically awful that they kick me out of my juried section, right? Like if I showed up with like crap one time, I'm out the next time.
I don't like to blame the recession on things, but it was a ghost town. My first time in Accent on Design New York Gift was winter of 2009. I don't like to blame the recession on things, but it was a ghost town. Like you could down the aisle. I had a terrible show. I lost money. But I knew ultimately that was where I was supposed to be. If I could just work my way through it, it was going to work. I've also been to shows where I did them. Maybe I had walked it first. It wasn't a super expensive show. I figured I'd give it a try. It was further away. Didn't take me 3 shows to know. Not my fit. So in terms of knowing if it's the right fit, you could roll bowling balls down the aisle. That I don't believe. I had a terrible show. I lost money. The thing about buyers wanting to see you a few times, I think there is a little bit of truth to that. But here's what I found. You can cheat this. They don't have to see you. My postcard is going to come to that trade show. Personal responsibility. But they're going to see that I'm doing what I always say is, and they might get in touch with me and say, hey, we're not going to be there. To the door. How else can we see your job to get them to your booth? And that's where this pre-show marketing actually pretty much every show might also try to sell you advertising. So I will not go to a show without having first done a mailer. You can advertise in the show directory. My postcard is going to come to that trade show. I found my postcard mailing tends to be more effective because it's more. And they might get in touch with me and say, hey, we're not going to be there. The one exception that I hear over and over again to that is the Atlanta gift show. Now, Some
Atlanta
shows, actually, pretty much every show, might also try to sell you exhibitors, and they've got all those showrooms. You could advertise in
and
their official
buyers
mailer,
get that
you could
show
advertise
guide
in the mail
show
early,
directory.
and they do their research. Tends to be more effective because it's right over and over again that advertising in that Atlanta pre-show guide or show guide is essential for your success. But you always want to pair other marketing with the trade show because you can't expect